Well, J Bob, everyone. Time, wasn't it? Yeah, I was -3 at the time, and mother was just a teenager. It's scary when, huh? That's right. More and more, yeah. As you get closer to memories that are 40 years old, you start rethinking your life. I can tell you. After Meher Baba left here in 1958, he sent the following message to everyone. He said, "The only place that can hold me is the heart. Keep me close with you. I am always there." I'll read it again since it's so short, and you may not have been listening the first time around. You were waiting for a long message, so you don't. I know how that is. You know, it's like the only place that can hold me is the heart. Keep me close with you. I am always there. As I've tried to hold Baba close, as each of you has tried to do, who love Baba, especially during this past year, I've thought quite a few times, actually, about how very fortunate I was to have first encountered Baba as a small child, and in this lifetime, and I felt, you know, it was a great opportunity, since I was invited to speak during this time of the anniversary of Meher Baba being here 37 years ago, that it'd be a great opportunity for me to share with you a little bit of what my rethinking of that encounter over these past months means to me now. I mean, the first thing to say is that it was a wonderful thing, now that I think about it, that there were no explanations of Baba that I was carrying into the lagoon cabin. And I'm sure that that many of you can identify with how wonderful it would be if we could clear our minds completely and encounter Baba directly. I felt lots of times since that that's what I would like to do, but it's not so easy to do. Sometimes life forces you to sort of clear away everything and start again, look at him fresh for the first time. But otherwise, it's very difficult to do. But I was fortunate because I didn't have to clear away anything, at least consciously, because I was 8 years old and I didn't know very much. So no one had explained everything to me, or if I'm sure that if they had tried, I wouldn't have taken it all in. And in fact, Elizabeth and Kitty were, of course, in my life by then, and had been in our life for about a year. So, you know, you would think that, well, by that time they had sort of explained a lot of things, but Elizabeth and Kitty were not that way. They weren't inclined to sort of explain, at least that was my experience of them. They didn't really talk about it, but they lived it. So now that I look back and I realize that I was very prepared really to walk in the lagoon cabin in ways that I didn't know, that I was unaware of, not just from whatever other connection I had with Meher Baba, but because Elizabeth and Kitty had, by just how they acted and lived, given me some taste of what his love is like. So that was very fortunate, but it didn't have to do with explanations or images or certain ways of speaking or understanding. And going to see Meher Baba then, here, was really in every way a direct encounter with him, as far as I could consciously know. And this has become more and more important to me, because over these past months, so many things that I thought about Meher Baba, that over these 37 years had kind of built up as my understanding of him, have been challenged, and some of them shattered. Images and ideas about him or his family or what he said, what he did, have been deeply challenged, in some cases completely blown away. So it became ever more important for me to go back to that encounter and to relive in my heart exactly who it was, and therefore who it is, that I live with every day. You know, Bob and I have been living together a long time now. At least in this life, it's a long time. And, you know, and it's, I suppose I've always heard about this and never quite experienced it, but, you know, you hear about these people who've been married for 40 years, and suddenly they wake up and they look over there and they say, well, who's this? You know? Because perhaps they've built up so many images and ideas and so forth, maybe most of it from themselves, that lost a sense of who that other person is. And going back and having this opportunity during the anniversary to relive and rethink that encounter has been a very wonderful experience for me. And I'll try to share a little of that as best I can. For me, the first thing to say about that is that my conviction now more than ever is that for myself, for my own experience, Meher Baba can only be known through a direct encounter in the heart. I mean, that is the only way he's known. And there's nothing one can do to bring that about. That's entirely from his side. And for me, that first encounter, as it is for many who love him, whether they encountered him first physically or not, that first encounter becomes kind of a touchstone for who it is that one is getting to know in one's heart. Because that's the whole story. It's getting to know him in one's heart. That's the whole journey. That's it. Nothing else matters. Nothing else counts. And so though many things come into play, many explanations and words and people and so forth in between, it remains getting to know this that we call Meher Baba in our heart. Now, though I have shared this story of meeting him many times, some of you may not know, and again, for me it's a new story out of my experiences in my recent life, and so I thought I would share it again as a window into how I feel about him now, how I see and experience him now. We were brought one by one, the kids, to meet Meher Baba. My brother first. Of course, my mother met Meher Baba first, but then my brother came, then I came, then finally my sister on successive days. That's how it was. So we each had our own day, our own time, and which was, now looking back, a wonderful thing. We had our own individual time where we went to see him. And I don't remember that I thought or expected anything at all. Now that's perhaps not the case. Perhaps I did, but my memory has been for all these years that I didn't expect anything. Didn't have any preconceived ideas or notions. I knew he was from India, and I knew this was a very special experience that I was going to have. I mean, because, first of all, I had been here, walked around the center, and I knew Elizabeth and Kitty, and there was a specialness to the whole atmosphere. There's a specialness. And I knew that, but I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know what to expect. And, but there was great anticipation. There were many people here, people sort of milling around the lagoon cabin, and then people lining up. And I was very shy as a child, and so I was very unhappy to be with all these people. I remember being a little confused, but someone instructed me to stand in the line and wait. And so, like a good soldier, I went and I stood in the line, and I waited, with some anticipation as to what I was going to see and who I was going to meet. But being 8 years old, naturally, my curiosity got the best of me, and I began to want to see into the building, the lagoon cabin, and I wanted to see who it was. But being little, everybody else being big, I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't see around them, and people were all in front of me. So I started to look around like this, and finally, just the crowd must have parted for a moment because I got a glimpse into the lagoon cabin through the screen door, and I saw sitting there in the chair Jesus. And the extraordinary thing, though, that in the last few months I've realized about that, and perhaps never appreciated fully until recently, it wasn't just Jesus. That is to say, some image of Jesus that you might see in a painting somewhere or on a Sunday school wall. It was my Jesus. You know, I mean, children, as most of you probably know, have their own image of what he looks like. And it may not really correspond to anybody else's. And I remember, because I had a strong connection to Jesus as a small child, I had my own image of what he looked like. And it wasn't any particular picture that you could point to and say, I'm sure it resembled them all, but it was my own. And there he sat. And you know, for so many years I relived that story and thought about it. I never fully appreciated that it was my Jesus. It wasn't yours or yours. It was mine sitting there. An extraordinary thing. And I remember thinking spontaneously, as clear as if it was yesterday, I remember thinking, as only a child can conclude in a flash, I remember saying to myself, oh, it's Jesus. Okay. And accepting it completely. I don't know how I leapt over the 2,000 years in my mind and arrived there, but there I was, and it was completely natural to me. So then I relaxed and I waited my turn. But it was very soon after that, if not moments after that, that someone came to the door and called me in. Now, it must have been Erich, but I don't know. And I came in, and seated in the chair that's still there was not my image of Jesus, of course, but it was Baba, as you've seen him in the films and the pictures, how he looked with his pink coat on, and it was Baba. But I was not surprised that it was Baba, that it was this man, this image, and not the one I had seen. It didn't take me aback at all. My only reaction was, when I entered the door, was to run up to him and to embrace him. I'm sure he must, have helped me with that by opening his arms and making me feel I could do that, because my normal inclination would have been as a child to hold back, being shy and reserved. But I ran to him, I embraced him, he embraced me. And I heard him say, and this here begins our relationship, because I heard him say, and I don't know whether this was something translated, I don't know whether it was something Erich must have said, that he gestured. I have no idea. I heard him say, looking at me, how you've grown. Now I remember that. And I didn't think it odd at all. I didn't. I mean, now again I look back and I think how remarkable it is that here he was, dressed as he was, silent, and then saying such a thing, and it never occurred to me that it was odd at all. None of those things came into my mind. And one would think that those would be the kinds of things that a child would first notice. But not at all. And I stood next to him as though I just belonged there. And I didn't know who else was there or what they were saying or doing. We were there together, and I didn't feel any need for somebody to tell me what he was saying. I didn't look to see who Erich was or who these other people were. I looked at Baba, and he looked at me, and we were just about eye level because he was seated and I was standing, and I was little. And I remember, because I was standing next to his chair, I took a position next to his chair over here, and Baba at one point looked at me and he said, and again I remember it clear as a bell how he said it, and I'm sure now he must have gestured, but I heard him say, "Would you like to go where I live, where I am?" And the one thing that I could popped in my mind, one fact I had, was that he was from India. And so I thought that's what he must mean, so I said spontaneously, "Oh yes," like that. And I've always been deeply grateful since that on whatever limited basis I made the decision that I said yes to Baba, because Baba looked very pleased at that. And he said, he looked at me and he said, "You will." And then at some point, I was outside again, and the time was over, and I don't know how long it was. It could have been a very long time or a short time, but it didn't seem to have a time. And I remember standing outside the lagoon cabin, and the overwhelming feeling I had standing outside, which was not a thought, because I didn't have a way to think about what had just happened to me. I had this overwhelming feeling that here is someone whose presence I never want to leave. That's the feeling. I can say it now, but I knew the feeling because it was like a magnet, because all the rest of the time that I was here, while he was here, I would try to be as near as possible to wherever he was. And the rest of the time was in pursuit of being somewhere near wherever he was. Now, you've seen the films of 1958, and I, cannot talk about that Sahabas in ways that are broader than my own story, because again, as a child, it was a child's view of it. I can't tell you all the discourses were said. I can read them now. And I can't explain to you, the dynamics of the people and what was happening. In fact, I've been a little, I have to go back and read the accounts and what day and what Baba went here and there, because my whole experience was just of Baba and myself. Now, I look at the films and I see there were lots of people there, and there were people crowding around Baba. But my experience of being there, of being here, was just being alone with him. I have no memory of where my brother and sister were. I don't remember where my mother was. And I don't remember any of these other people. Even people I loved, like Elizabeth and Kitty. I have no memory of them at all. I read afterwards that Baba said that that was also his experience of the Sahaba. Not being alone with me, but but being alone. But he said that he said, you want to know how I experience the Sahabas? He said, I experience the Sahabas is I'm embracing myself, and I'm seeing myself, I'm enjoying myself. And when I read that, I didn't feel so bad, because on the other end of it, that was how I experienced it, as though he were the only one there. And so, the time could have been any amount of time that he was here. It could have been any number of days. I don't know. But the thing I discovered in those days, which now I go back to, is my touchstone for who it is that I've been living with these many years. I discovered that he really is whoever else he is. He is my compassionate Father, which is, of course, his very name. But those were the attributes that he revealed most to me during that time. And of course, for me as a child, it wasn't the big things. It wasn't his explanations. I'm sure this was true for adults too, because Baba had a way of making everyone as a child. But I, of course, didn't listen to the explanations and didn't pay any attention to that. It was just Baba. It was the little things that he did and how he was, that awakened me to something of what it is for someone to be compassionate, to be my Father. For example, when he would go from the lagoon cabin to get into the car, and I would try to rush to hold the door, because, of course, I found out early, if you did something for Baba, you got his attention. If you were in the way, and if you were doing some activity, trying to be helpful, I'm sure it was not as helpful as I thought it was, but trying to be helpful, Baba would reach out and pat you, or touch you, or take your chin. So I would rush to get the door, open the door, and I'm sure I must have pushed people aside, but again, I wasn't aware of that. I apologize to any of those people I did push aside, but but all I was aware of was Baba getting in the car, and I rushed and pushed to get to the front, because you had to watch the door of the lagoon cabin, because he'd come out, and then you had to be in the right place. It wasn't a very long walk. But he was leaving the center to go to Mother's Theater, which is now the Shrine Club, and some, I think, seafood restaurant up on the highway, one of the 8 million seafood restaurants. And Baba was going there, and it was the only time I think he left the center during this visit. He was going there to see these films that had been taken of him in 1956. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know where he was going, I didn't know what he was doing, and I didn't care. All I knew was that he was leaving in the car, and I was crushed. Now, I know it sounds kind of odd. I mean, I knew he wasn't going permanently, he wasn't leaving the center, but I was crushed that somehow he was leaving, and I was being left behind. Or I was afraid I was being left behind. I'm sure I wouldn't have been. And so I held the door, and I closed the door, and I must have looked particularly pitiful through the window, and Baba looked at me, and he stopped Elizabeth, who was driving, and then he had the door opened again, and he told me to come and get in. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized, and it's just, again, these are little things, very little things, and no one notices these things except oneself, but it's these little things that bring him home to me, that he had to move over, you see, in order to let me sit there. It was not a big car, and Elizabeth was there driving, and Baba in the front. So Baba, to make room for me, had to move into the middle of the car. And it wasn't until a long time later that I realized that Baba, he was in great pain, that whole Sahabas. His hip was bothering him. It was very difficult for him to walk. He didn't sleep very well. I read about all this later. I didn't have any idea what it is, suffering. He didn't show me he was suffering. He was always teasing and loving and joking and sweet. I didn't know he was suffering. So he had to move over, and then there's this big hump in the middle of the thing, in these cars in those days, the hump there. And poor Baba had to sit in the middle and put his legs up like that. And it must have been very uncomfortable for Baba, for someone who could barely walk, who had to be carried and held. He moved over and he put his legs up so I could sit in his seat, where he, comfortable seat. And I didn't realize until a long time later. I never realized, and I'm sure no one would notice such a thing. Only in that moment, Baba, being so compassionate and so sweet, would rather respond to the heart of a child who felt left out than to see to his own comfort. And now I realize, we have no idea. I say we, I don't know, maybe you do. I have no idea how he suffers for us. No idea at all. The whole life he lived was such a life of suffering, and I feel like sometimes I gloss it over. Well, he was God after all. What is it to suffer if you're God? But it's worse. It's not better. If you are all bliss, then to go back into the nightmare for the sake of yourself who's still ensnared in it is not, our suffering is nothing compared to that, because we don't know the difference. And now, whenever I think, I don't know who you are, Baba, I can't grasp you as God and all that, I remember that time when he moved his seat. I remember it because it reminds me that I don't have to understand who he is. All I need to know is that he is compassion itself. He is the one who doesn't just say, I love you, my love is this, and love, love, love. No, he is the one who suffers with us. When we got to the theater, by this time, of course, I was almost in bliss myself, because I was so happy to be riding with him, and so determined to be good also, not to be a nuisance. And because this was the dream come true, to be there with him in the car. Then he came to the theater and he met my sister for the first time. In fact, I remember when we drove up, looking up at Baba, and I remember seeing my mother and Wendy standing together, waiting to greet him, in identical dresses, and sort of white and purple. I don't have a very good visual memory, but that's how it so touched me, not because of them, but because of the expression on his face. How happy Baba was. And how he he pointed at them, at the matching dresses, and how excited he was to meet Wendy. Well, who wouldn't be, just to meet Wendy? And she, of course, bounded up to Baba, and we went in the theater, and Baba sat to watch the movies, and which I was not interested in at all, what it was that we're doing, and I didn't care who was there. My idea was if I could get up front and sit next to his feet, that was my idea. So I was scrunching along, and I got up there, and Wendy also, by this time, she caught on very quickly. She was scrunching up on the other side, and so we ended up, I'm sure with some bruised feelings along the way of other people, but anyway, we ended up on either side of his feet. And of course, Mother was concerned about this, I think, because, and this is one time I became conscious of her, because she was concerned because we might be blocking Baba and also squirming or whatever, that 6 and 8 year olds might do during this long film. And she was concerned that, Baba would be distracted there and be annoyed with us for being there. So, I guess. But she was trying to, tell us to move away. I mean, my idea was if I sat there next to his feet, just have his feet, all to myself the whole time. I don't know why, but I was very drawn to the feet. I don't know, I didn't see the movie. I was very drawn. He had them crossed. And so I was sitting there next to the feet, and I wasn't about to move. And Baba said it's all right. He told Mother that it was all right, that we could stay. And then the movie started, and of course, it became my first test of what am I going to do to deserve this magnificent spot there, So I was like a rock. I didn't move the whole thing, except I stared at Baba's feet. I didn't dare touch them. I was tempted, but I didn't. And then I had to cough, which was a terrible nightmare. I had this tickly feeling that one gets when, you feel you have to cough. And I thought, well, I'll suppress this cough. I won't cough, because I was afraid I'd start a coughing fit, and then Mother's worst nightmare would come true. We were disturbing Baba and all that. So I was trying very hard not to cough. I was telling myself I'm not going to cough. It was one of these tickle things, though, that kept coming and making it worse and worse. And finally, when I thought I wasn't going to be able to hold out anymore with this cough, I feel this hand on my back like that. And somehow Baba, even though he had limited movement, Baba managed to reach out and pat me on the back. And I looked around, and Baba looked at me and he said, "Go ahead, cough." So I coughed up a storm, and and again, it's a touchstone. It's a little thing. I mean, who else would notice it? It's not a big moment, but it was that touchstone, though, that I keep going back to, because so many times over the years, as I'm sure you experience as well, one wants to feel that he knows everything in our hearts. Not just whether we want to cough, but I mean more important things than that. But bringing that home, that beginning of a lesson, that he is aware, he is alert, he responds, he's thinking of us, is something I go back to time and again. And the other little moment that comes back again and again happened also outside the lagoon cabin. And it was one of these, it seems to be a lot of things about going back and forth from the car, but that's when I got a lot of time with Bob. I was come out of the car, go into the lagoon cabin, into the car. So that little journey from the lagoon cabin to the car was a very important time. And I came in the few days, now to me it wasn't a few days, but it was a few days. I came in a few days to feel that it was my due that whenever I would walk by or be near him, Baba would pay attention. Again, because it's the case. I was oblivious to whoever else was there, to what else was going on. And I felt that Baba, by this time, we were so intimate and familiar that he would notice me whenever he was near me. I didn't even think about it. I just expected it. This is how one gets very quickly around Baba. And spoiled love and attention. I really felt that he, he would never ignore me. So when he got out of the car on this particular occasion, and he had the he had the walking sticks, and he made his way into the lagoon cabin, I was waiting right there, positioned just perfectly, for my hug and my pat or something. And he went right on past. Smiling and all, but right above my head. He went right on past. And the reason it's so important to me, it was as a child, is because it's the first time I had ever experienced Baba ignoring me. The first time I had experienced that he just didn't know I was there. Or at least that's how it felt. In my heart, it felt like, I just remember this tremendous pain and sort of anxiety. And as soon as he got past me, without thinking, I reached out and grabbed hold of his sadra. It didn't even occur to me not to, I just spontaneously, and I hope I didn't pull too hard, but I grabbed hold and I pulled at Baba like that. And then Baba stopped. And he turned around, and then he reached down and he swooped me up and he held me. And actually that moment was preserved forever, because Mother took the picture at that moment. And all the pictures she took in 1958, none of them came out. I don't know quite why. They were all black, except for this one came out. And that's why I will always remember that moment, because I have all of this emotion on my face, and Baba is holding me and reassuring me that he would never ignore me. But it taught me a very important lesson, and over the years I've gone back to that moment many times too, because it taught me that one should never let Baba get away with ignoring one. And because he will do it just to see how much we want his company, and how much we long for him. And he wants us to want him, to grab hold of him, to make him pay attention that we're there. And of course, it becomes an inner dynamic. It quickly did, because Meher Baba left physically the center. He went back to India, which might have just as well been another planet. Or for me, I had no idea where India was. I had no idea whether I would see him again. And I remember the experience of being bereft when he left and feeling, wondering where he was and whether I would ever see him again, was reinforced now, the feeling of being lost, by what people told me about him. In other words, when I knew very little, I could well believe that he could think of me, that he loved me, that he was interested in me. And that's a visual age. That's about how big I was. Megan's 8, isn't she? She's 6. She's 6. She was like Wendy's. She's big. She's Wendy's age, but she was my size. And I remember the more people told me about Meher Baba, the worse my anxiety got about whether or not he could remember me or care. In other words, I began to wonder whether all of this experience I had had was in myself and had less to do with him. Why? Because people told me that after all he was the avatar. And I learned that that means he comes for the whole world. That he's come many times before and so forth. In other words, he's a very big deal, important personage. And he has a lot of work that he does. In fact, universal in scope. That the affairs of the world are on his shoulders and so forth. And the more they told me, the more anxious I got. Because after all, if he has all of this to do, and if he's that important, then how could he possibly have time for me? And how could he possibly be thinking of me with all of these other demands on his time? And I remember that year of both intimacy, thinking of him, and tremendous longing to see him and be with him, and also that feeling of, does he think of me? Does he remember me? And it was a painful time because learning about him confirmed more and more that he couldn't possibly have time for me, much less for all these other people. And then about a year after he left, a letter came from Mani and Mara to my mother. And in it, they told her this. They said, we saw the 1958 Myrtle Beach Sahabas film the other day. They wrote, there were really beautiful shots, and a number of times the fair head of little Charles showed beside Baba, and Baba would immediately point him out to us. And when I read that, then I knew that Meher Baba was my Baba, and that he was everyone's Baba, and that he did remember. I didn't know how that was possible, but I knew it was true. That just as I remember him, he remembers me. And as the months wore on, and he became more and more my Baba and myself, I began to realize how it was possible. Because this Baba, somehow, I discovered, was something always available to me. I still thought of him in India and longed to see him, but I also began to experience him as somehow available and personal. Someone I could speak to, someone I could live with, take everything to. And what I learned growing up that way as a child, with both the longing to see him and the experience of being with him inside, because I was a shy child, an introverted child, I spent a lot of time alone and talking with Baba, being with Baba. And what I learned is that Meher Baba is so deeply personal that he is uniquely different for every person. And I learned that Baba is so universal that he and he alone can treat each person individually. I mean, that was not something I intellectually thought. It was an experience that I was beginning to have. It's such an extraordinary thing because there is nothing like that in human experience. And that's what people have always called the Christ. It's that label, or avatar, whatever the word is, it's a label that sometimes obscures the reality. And the reality is that that we label is the one who is able to treat each one as an individual. I mean, completely. The whole journey, the whole relationship is between the lover and this beloved. Unlike a great master who brings people to his level, to her level, who gives teachings and helps people to progress on the path and all that, he's not that. Not even a perfect master is this that he is. He is that aspect of reality that is the most personal. And that's not just something he talks about. It's something he brings about and awakens differently in each person. Now, when he drops his body, soon afterwards, what happens in history is that people can't bear that. It's true. And of course then, the inevitable, and this is part of his work too, the inevitable is that then people try to hold him. Baba says that's where religions come from. They try to keep him here and say this is what he is and who he is and all that. But, and as Erich would say, that's their portion when that happens. It inevitably happens. But that's not him. And I know that's not him because growing up with him as a child, I didn't have anything blocking me to experience that he and I were in our own relationship, our own world. And I realized that what Elizabeth, my Auntie Boo, always said to me was true. She said, you see, Baba treats each one as an individual. And only Baba, she said, can do that. Only Baba. And we don't have to do it for other people. And we don't have to hold it here and make it happen, because he'll come again and awaken that again within each person when the time is right. So that was the deepest thing that happened in those years after he left, was I realized that he was treating me uniquely as an individual. Now, that does not mean that Baba didn't give clues to himself. And I was very interested to learn what he meant by finding him within my heart. And I was interested in all the clues Baba gave. His discourses are there, people who lived with him, places he visited. But what Elizabeth always helped me to see, and Baba always confirmed in my experience of him, was that we should never mistake these clues to him in here for him himself. Or as Elizabeth used to say, she said, remember this. She said, people will always try to limit Baba. But she said, no one can limit Baba. No one. So clues are clues. They are not Baba. In fact, Baba told us, he said, each of you is free to interpret my words as you wish. But, he said, state it is your interpretation. That's all. Because, as he says at the end of the Everything and the Nothing, that wonderful expression, words that proceed from the source of truth have real meaning. But when men speak these words as their own, they become meaningless. So who is to speak for Baba? Nobody. But they're clues, vital, important marks of his presence, how to get to him. It only all is in service of getting to know him better individually in one's own heart. Not like anybody else. Elizabeth deflected my attempt to get to know Baba as Elizabeth knows Baba. I called her Auntie Boo. She wouldn't do it, and she wouldn't let me stop there, and Kitty was the same. Our experience with these people that I still feel were living expressions of his love was they kept saying, as Baba said to us 100,000 times if he said it once, find me in your heart. There alone am I found. But I took very seriously the clues. I was fortunate, more than I can say, that the examples I had were people who didn't talk about it. People who didn't try to explain it all to me and make me understand more, you know. They were very patient, but they lived it. It's a different thing. And so I was very fortunate that that was the example that someday, by his grace, I might be able to even begin to be like that. But the thing that was brought home to me is you must find him within yourself, and it must be your Baba and your relationship with Baba. The clues are wonderful. I've been to India many, many times, and I would not trade anything for the great experience. But they are all, those experiences, what the Sufis have always called getting the scent. That's all. Getting the scent. To mistake the scent for him is to miss the opportunity that he gave through all of these things that he left behind. So all the clues that he gave during that time as I was growing up, I was fascinated. I took advantage of as many of them as I could, and I tried to get to know Baba. And I now feel that that period of time between 58 and 62, when we saw him again, was when Baba, through all of these clues he gave in my life, shaped my conscience and my heart about who he is. Because it's during that time that I began to listen to him inside. Because, you see, we didn't hear from India. And we didn't have the luxury of riding over to India every time we had a question or a concern, you know. Baba, what should we do, and all that. In fact, it was not permitted. Baba was in seclusion. And sometimes messages would come back, and Baba would say almost inevitably, he would say, do your best, I will help you. In other words, the answer is there with you. And he kept putting it back to us. So it's during that time that we began to learn how to listen to him in our own hearts. And one thing he said years ago that has meant a great deal to me, particularly in these past few months, when he said, do nothing, he said, even to please me or the world, against the dictates of your own conscience. Unhesitatingly do what you think to be right and proper, despite the opposition of the world. Let your mind be as firm as a rock, because he speaks, even when he's in the body, he speaks most clearly from within here. And that's not my idea. That's why he said he was silent. It was his great gift to the world this time to bring it so clearly home that he wouldn't even speak. And he said that when he breaks his silence, then we will know that that is the word we have always been longing to hear. When the word of his love speaks in our hearts. And these are not just words. He spent 44 years in silence in order to bring home this simple thing. That I don't speak out here. I don't speak through these words. I don't speak through these photographs of these wonderful people or even this beautiful place. I speak through your heart. Now that's a very risky business, but it's always been a risky business. Throughout time it's been a risky business. That's why as soon as possible we try to get away from it. It's too difficult. We say we want it. Yes, speak to me. But it's very difficult because it's very risky business and very painful business to really discover him in oneself. And my anxiety about this grew very great when Baba invited us to see him again in 1962. I say my anxiety about this because, you see, I began to have great doubts that my Baba that I was listening to was Baba. I'm sure none of you have ever had this experience, but and I was actually going to confront him out here, you see, so it was even greater anxiety. It's one thing if you don't have to confront him. With this difference between your Baba and him sitting there. And I had become very personal with him over these years of 58 to 62, so much so that I felt I was, in fact, close. My Baba. I didn't think, I wasn't presumptuous, and I don't think now that my Baba is your Baba. And I'm not saying everybody should have the same Baba. God forbid, then we wouldn't have Baba at all. But my Baba was deeply important to me because he was my father, he was my companion, he was my inner conscience and voice. And all those years of beginning to experience that and then suddenly wondering whether when I actually walked in Guru Prasad, somebody else would be there. And I would be completely off, wrong, misled. And that was my great anxiety. And of course, as an adolescent, it was very particularly painful to think about this. And the anxiety grew and grew and grew as I got closer to that day. I was excited to see Baba, very happy, but I also had tremendous anxiety that my Baba would somehow not be there. It would be someone else. And then where would I be? Who would I be? And I remember the first morning when we lined up outside. I seem to always be in lines, but we were lining up outside, all the men. It was just the men. I guess it was in the afternoon because the women went in the morning, and it was us in the afternoon, and it was all the men together. And I began to feel more and more anxious, getting closer and closer to the threshold. And suddenly, it was my time, and I was crossing the threshold into the room where Baba was sitting on the sofa at the end of the room. And had this tremendous excitement to see him and this tremendous anxiety about, is it Baba? Baba. Means, is it Baba I know? Baba. And I couldn't see him for all the people. But suddenly I saw a hand shoot up above the crowd so that I could see it, way up in the air, like that. And as soon as I saw the hand, I knew it was Baba. It was my Baba. I don't know why that gesture did that, but I knew. And then I was happy. I waited my turn. I got up to him. And he looked at me. And again he said, "How you've grown." This time it might have made a little more sense. But this time I also knew he meant more. He told me in the interim through letter that I had had a deep past connection with him. So now I realized that he wasn't measuring me by my physical growth. But I flew into his arms again, and it seemed like the next day from 58. No time had passed. And I remember that the thing that I wanted most in the moment was to always remember what he felt like. Because one of the hardest things about my memories of 58 was that I couldn't remember what he physically felt like. And so poor Baba, I leaned over and I rubbed his cheek with my cheek. His cheek was smooth as a baby's bottom. It was very smooth. And then I leaned over the other side and I rubbed his other cheek. Baba looked at me as if to say, "What are you doing?" But I could feel it, and I wanted to remember what he felt like. And then I wouldn't stop there. I grabbed his shoulders like this, and I held him tight between my hands like that. And Baba looked at me and he smiled. He knew what I was doing. But that Baba was my Baba. But not only that, he was also each one's Baba. You imagine that. My Baba, who was quite different, I'm sure, from the experience of so many others who came, was also their Baba. Only Baba can be that to everybody. Only Baba can be that. Well, today is, I'll end with this, that it's 37 years later, and sometimes I think that in these 37 years, I get off track, and I start looking for him in the oddest places, forgetting where I found him in the first place. And I didn't find him in the lagoon cabin, I didn't find him in India. I certainly didn't find him in any book I read. I didn't even find him through Elizabeth and Kitty. As hard as it is to believe and to grasp, because I don't feel I'm worthy of even thinking such a thing, I found him in myself. Sometimes I feel like that old famous Sufi story, of the mullah who lost his keys, and he's searching for them in the light. That wonderful image comes to me about myself. And somebody comes up to him, as you remember, and says, "Mullah, if you lost your keys over there in the house, why are you searching here for them?" And he says, "Well, because here there's light." And that's how I feel sometimes, here there's light, I think, but I found him there. I found him here. And that's what I have to keep going back to. Sometimes circumstances force us to do that. But as circumstances means what? I suppose that means Baba. I suppose that means His grace. Elizabeth told me that this would happen. She warned me about this. That she said, Baba should remember in your life, this is when I was a child, she said, Baba will take away the rhinestones, but he will give you the diamond. This whole past year at the First Amendment Center where I work, I have an office in Nashville. There's a wonderful woman who cleans this building. One of the people who cleans the building every day. She comes in very early and she cleans up everything that with the mess we leave, and she stays late into the day. And this whole year, I go in and I look for her because I know what's going to happen. The same thing happens every day. I look for her. And she sees, the minute she sees me, she says, how are you, Charles? I said, I'm fine, Clara. And then I say, how are you? And she looks at me every day the same, with this huge smile on her face, and she says, I'm blessed. Now I seek her out because I'm blessed, and I want to hear her say it. I'm so blessed. Because Elizabeth, it turns out, is so right about this as well as so many other things, that he takes away all the rhinestones in our life. He is, after all, Meher Baba, the great taker. This is no surprise, I'm sure, or shock to any of you here, I'm sure. He's the great taker. It's his habit, it's his way, it's his work. He takes away himself. Means images, ideas, buildings built to him. Takes them away. He comes again and he says something completely different than he said last time. And says, oh, you can't be him because you said, you can't possibly because you don't even look like him. He takes it all away. He takes and he takes and he takes because he loves. He loves so completely that he has to take. And it's a very painful love sometimes. Because naturally we'd like to keep a few of these baubles that we have. He takes by making us face everything that we least want to face. About ourselves, about other people. You know, in December of '93, when we decided to move here, we bought a painting from Phyllis. Beautiful painting of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, holding that cup that he asked his Father to have passed from him. At least that's how I understand the painting. That's what I see when I look at it. It's Baba as the Christ holding the cup. I should have known then we were in for a tough year. And I've looked at that painting every day since then. And, you know, it was on this day, 37 years ago, when Baba was here in the barn, May 27th, that he brought that up. And he said, you know, I'm paraphrasing a little, but he said, you know, he said, Christ, Jesus, could have avoided the crucifixion. Could have. But he didn't. Baba said he didn't use his power. To such an extent did he not use his power that when he was on the cross, he prayed to God, and he said, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" He prayed, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" That's the extent to which he didn't use his power. And Baba said, "And I don't use mine." He said, "This is the period of my humiliation, suffering." He said, "I don't use mine." So this love of his does make us face, I mean, if he himself in that garden has to face what he faced, if Baba himself has to face such great suffering on our behalf, what is it for us to face? Nothing. All the suffering we face would be nothing compared to that. But for us, of course, it's very real. It's very difficult. But the only way, he says, to grow in our consciousness, to grow in love of him, is through that suffering. It's actually the only way. If there were any other way, then I'm sure Christ would have found it, and Baba would have found it, and he would make it available to all of us, but there is no other way. But even then, he gives the diamond. Because these things that he takes are nothing, really. They're zero. They're empty. They're nothing. Oh, I know. I mean, I cling to this, I cling to that, I have these ideas. We all have these things we cling to. But afterwards, we wonder, why did we cling to these things for so long? It's only when they're being ripped away do we think that it's something important or big. It's nothing. But then, as soon as he's taking these things away, or while he's doing it even, he's giving this diamond, this many-faceted diamond, which reflects all this beauty and this love, and is so much more wonderful than anything and everything that he took away. And like Clara says, I am so blessed. I'm so blessed. He's given me a way to love him that is such an incredible gift of love. All I ever asked for Baba growing up is true. All I ever asked for Baba is, may I have a companion so that I can learn to love you more. Well, he gave me that. And Christopher. And in this past year, he gave me the diamond of his love through rediscovering who my mother is. Extraordinary thing. We all have these ideas about our mothers, and what a wonderful thing to have those shattered and then to see it again, and to see what love is there, what courage is there, which should not be surprising, because I guess I took it for granted all these years and had so much that I was interested in and working out and all that I just didn't see it. But it's not surprising, because here's someone, he said, is of my innermost circle. And I've had the privilege of being in this relationship. Challenging and difficult at times, but what a great privilege. And this year he's given me so much love through it. And then, of course, this love of Baba's is not something abstract or, Baba loves us, Baba loves us. It's through the family and the friends and the people that he lives in and that he works through. And so many people have shown such love that I never could have imagined Baba giving so much love as he's given. So this is, for me, speaking as very personally, but this is anniversary time the most wonderful of all the anniversaries with Meher Baba, the greatest of all. Because so much that's been shattered about Meher Baba has been replaced by what I knew all along, and that is that he is love itself. Let's join in a moment of silence with our beloved. Jai Baba. The last messages that Meher Baba sent to me is a very simple thing, 2 lines. In a letter from Mani, Baba sent it, and the letter was all about what you're going to do in your future and all that, and wonderful letter. But the 2 lines that I'll always remember, because Mani said this is what Baba says to remember. Baba says, I alone am real. All else is zero. I alone am real. All else is zero. I want to thank you for letting me share my personal time with him on this anniversary. It's been a great joy. I appreciate it, especially those of you who braved the bikers and other hazards to be here tonight. And it's been a great joy to be with you. Jai Baba.